Welcome to the podcast. We talk about all the things that are hidden in the shadows.
What is up, guys? This is Megan, and on this episode, it's only Megan. So Isaac pretty much has been working his butt off at work currently, and it's honestly been super hard to get down to record. He's been doing super long shifts, and with the heat and the humidity in eastern North Carolina, it's horrible. So it takes a toll on the body and a little bit on the mind. So I said, no worries, I got you. Isaac's done episodes with me in the past, or without me in the past. So I thought, no big deal. You guys can just hang out with me for episode 2 of Mount Shasta. So this is going to be fun. I'm excited about this. And I have a lot of crazy stories to kind of tell you guys. So in the previous episode, we talked all about the crazy legends and lores about Mount Shasta. But this episode, like I said, we are diving into personal experiences. So this is going to be encounter stories and personal experiences that other people have had that make you go, whoa, Mount Shasta, what do you have going on over there? You know? So also, to make this episode a little bit more interesting, I added some added sound effects here and there. Let us know if you like them and want to hear more of them. I know I've experimented with them here and there in past episodes. And with myself personally, I always like them when they're integrated into personal encounter stories to create more of an ambiance. I think I said that word weird. I don't know. Isaac's not here to correct me. I don't know. Okay. I don't know. It's a hard way because the way we conversate, because sometimes it's less stories and more perspectives and research and theories. So it's kind of hard to like put spooky wood sounds or night sounds or, hey, this is or camping. I don't know. Camping sounds, whatever those might be, you know, or growls or things to just fit the mood of the story. It's hard when you're just like talking about theories and push those in. So for us personally, we've kind of strayed away from adding sound effects in and like music or low frequencies or stuff like that, just because it didn't really fit like how we conversate. But in situations like this, when it's just me and I'm telling you guys some funk stories, might work. So I am testing it out this episode. So if you dig it, let us know. If you don't, I guess let us know, but just please do it in a nice way. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, if you guys like it, just let us know. If not, then no worries. But otherwise, let's jump right in and start with the first story. So, of course, with these, I always jump to Reddit and Facebook forums. If you've listened to the podcast in the past, you know I always say that line, to the forums. Because they normally have the most candid and strange encounters there. And people are more natural on like Reddit and I guess Facebook posts, because 9 times out of 10, they're trying to connect with other people, kind of get validation and see what they've actually experienced, if other people have experienced this. And I feel like, I don't know, it's an easy way to like read the story and then you can easily converse with the experiencer about what happened. You know, obviously when you read an article that it's like a public story that was told multiple times, it's hard to be able to get a hold of the person that experienced it and ask like, hey, what happened here, or like, did you get any other feelings, or have you had any other experiences? Because 9 times out of 10, those people want to talk about it. So I've always had very positive encounters with looking at Reddit stories and then coming in contact with the experiencer and getting more information about it. And then 2, sometimes those people are local to the area and will tell you more stories that they've encountered and places to look that you wouldn't normally be able to look if you just looked on like a mass article or something like that. So again, that's why I always go to Reddit and Facebook. So people are like, Reddit and Facebook, really? But yeah, I do. So, all right, moving on to the first encounter. So this is what was shared on Reddit about this person's encounter. The story kind of talks about like eerie silence, when things go silent, and that's happened a couple times to us at locations, which I'll talk about, you know, like a little bit later after the story is read. First story was posted about 2 years ago, so just keep that in mind. I've recently moved to Weed, California, a small town next to Mount Shasta, for work. I'm an avid hiker and love exploring, so naturally, 2 days ago I decided to go hike the mountain on one of my days off. Not entirely sure why, but I decided to drive my car very deep into the forest surrounding the base of the mountain, as far as the dirt road would allow me. It was around 3 p.m. with a clear sky, so I was very confident in enjoying the scenery as I got out of my car and started my hike, heading closer to the mountain. At first, it was your regular everyday hike, lots of birds and squirrels around, the smell of nature that fills your lungs as you walk through the terrain. It wasn't until I reached a small, dried-up river that I noticed something was off. As I stopped to look at the dried-up river and take photos, I noticed that it was very strangely quiet. No birds chirping, no signs of squirrels or other animals, and even the sound of the wind you hear when you're on a mountain seemed to be completely gone. At the time, I thought it was just an odd coincidence and started walking up alongside the river. But as I kept walking and being able to only hear my own footsteps, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not the kind of feeling that makes you think someone is outside your window watching you. The kind of feeling that makes you feel like multiple people or things are observing your every movement, studying you. I've never had that kind of feeling in my life, but what happened after made me completely forget about that feeling. I suddenly started to hear something out of nowhere that sounded like angelic humming, or maybe a song with no lyrics. But it also sounded strangely electric, like the sound telephone lines make. It wasn't very loud, but enough to make me look in the direction it was coming from. I looked at the other side of the dried-up river that had multiple trees and other foliage to see someone or something looking straight at me. It almost looked like a ghost with it looking completely white, but this thing was very clearly there. It almost looked like it was wearing a robe, but I couldn't see any feet, hands, or even a face, although it had an oval head. However, I could feel it looking straight at me, almost as if it was trying to remember every detail. Even from afar away, I could tell that its entire body had a very weird texture, almost like porcelain, but if porcelain was a silky fabric. It was very obviously not human. I was very understandably in complete shock and terror, frozen in place, kind of scared. We both looked at each other for what felt like forever, but it was most likely around 20 to 30 seconds. I very, very slowly started walking backwards. I don't think I took more than 2 steps when it tilted its head, as if it was curious or even surprised at what I was doing. All the while I could still hear that angelic, electric humming, and I swear it got louder when I took those steps back. When I turned my head to look behind me to make sure the way was clear so I could run, the song suddenly stopped, abruptly, without warning. This shocked me, and when I turned back to look at the thing, it was gone. No sign of it anywhere. As soon as I had saw that it disappeared, I ran as fast as I could, following the path I took back. Even after it had disappeared, and while I was running, I could still feel like I was being watched from all sides. I almost tripped a few times in how fast I was going. When I got to my car, sounds of animals and the mountain wind suddenly came back, but I was still scared, out of my mind, and drove as fast as I could away from the mountain. I've never had anything paranormal happen to me in the past, and I've honestly always been very skeptical of stuff like that. But this experience has left me questioning a lot of things. I don't think I want to go back on that mountain. I've even had a nightmare about the experience. I'm not even sure what I saw or what even to call it. So this is actually crazy because I'm going to share with you another story towards the end of the episode that actually talks about this person was traveling close to Mount Shasta and they saw an all white figure walking alongside of the road. So it's kind of interesting that, this story was that it was all white. It's also a bit crazy because there's a story I'm also going to mention later on that references eerie silentness, especially surrounding Mount Shasta. And pulling from our own experiences, I know I've witnessed like the eerie silence and humming before. So with me, this actually took place in a national forest. And honestly, at this point, I kind of I kind of want to do an episode on just national forest and like theories and ideas, what's kind of going on. Because, everybody, I feel like in the paranormal community has some sort of like theory about national forest. And we have quite a few in North Carolina. One in particular we actually investigate called the Croatoan National Forest. And I know we've talked about it on so many episodes, but so basically Patsy's Pond, when we mentioned that, and Pringle Road are both part of the Croatoan National Forest. And we've had some crazy experiences. I want to say it's kind of like on the outskirts of the national forest. And it's more, if you're local to us, it's more on the Newport side of things versus like Havelock. But I know I've talked about it a couple times here and there, sprinkled throughout different episodes. But when we were part of Shadow Walker Paranormal, me and another teammate on the team named also Megan would constantly hear what sounded like Ariel from The Little Mermaid singing. Like that scene where she starts at like one octave and she keeps going higher and keeps going higher. And you can even hear us on past footage. Like we go like, why are we hearing singing? It happened there in the Croatoan National Forest. And then it also happened on a case that we were doing not too far from that area, that it was on a farm. And we would hear like the singing. And it's a different kind of singing. Like you would, I don't know. It wasn't like a humming, like, like maybe a spirit was humming a song from like when they were alive or anything like that. It's a weird thing, and I can't even explain it. It makes the hairs on the back of your neck kind of stand up, and it doesn't feel right. And the best way I could put it is it's kind of like, I guess if you watch any kind of horror movies or any kind of like pirate movies or anything like that, and they try to depict like a siren, that's what it reminds me of. And it's very weird. I don't know. Yeah. So that's one thing that I've noticed myself that kind of correlates to that story. And that was in, like I said, a national forest, and there's a national forest area around Mount Shasta. So again, weird. And I feel like at this point, national forest deserves to be an episode. I don't know. Let us know if you think it should be. I feel like it should, especially with the missing 411, the cave systems, and all of that. Super interesting stuff and super thought-provoking as well. But another thing that I also thought that was interesting to bring up is, we're talking about the eerie quietness when things get quiet. And that has happened multiple times at multiple like wooded area investigations that we've done. So anybody that follows knows that we consistently go into the woods and investigate. And that's one thing that happens a lot. And you'll hear us in videos that we share and stuff like that of saying like, whoa, it's like eerie quiet. It's like really quiet. So I normally feel like when it gets like eerie quiet like that, to definitely watch the surroundings. And it could be energetic or it can be an actual thing. Because we're going to talk about here in a second about apex predators and what that means. Because that's a theory with like Bigfoot and stuff like that. So, but one thing that's I don't feel like is necessarily talked about enough, and I know I've had a lot of experience with it, is, we're talking about the quietness, but there's also situations where it's like environments get very, very loud. I found a crazy correlation for myself with dark energy and like the environmental sounds getting super loud. So off the top of my head, one story that specifically resonates that we've told you guys that we've experienced is when Isaac tells a time where basically I had that dark thing kind of influencing me at my sleep in the Spring Branch house. Initially, what woke him up in the story was the fact that the fan was so loud. Now, I'm not saying like every time you hear loud environmental sounds like your fan or the clock or certain things, like just like energy in the room, like hearing it super loud. I'm not saying like every single time there's a dark entity in the room, but I've just noticed that it's like a warning sign for me to pay attention to the energy in the room. But it does give that crazy unnerving sound. Like when I start hearing the fan get super loud, and it's kind of like, normally you barely hear a fan, right? Like a ceiling fan. But it gets like crazy loud to where you can hear every like sound. And it's like super loud and like almost like it's like, when you're editing video or something like that, and you put the like time to go double, or like less the speed. Sorry, that came out weird. I don't know. But less the speed, like make it go slower. That's what it kind of sounds like. And I don't know. It's crazy, and I've found that correlation with things, and it's happened to me on investigations. It happened to me one time too. We were with No Quarter Paranormal, and we were at the Webb Memorial Library, which was an indoor investigation. And I was by myself in one of the rooms, and I was hearing like the environmental sounds like super loud. Like the air condition got really loud, like almost like tunneling in my ear, and the fan as well. And so it made me just like pay attention, you know? And so I just found that interesting. So if you're ever out, you know, like just cruising along in like woods or something, and it starts getting eerily quiet or really, really loud for whatever reason, just pay attention to your surroundings, because it might be a warning of some sort. But one thing with the Reddit stories that I always love to do is dive into the comments to see if there's anybody else that experienced it or any insight that somebody can give. And again, that's where like the locals sometimes will comment on it, especially if they know the area. So one comment was actually talking about how the whole Ashland to Shasta area definitely has an enigmatic aura to it. And to that person, the whole area does feel otherworldly. Definitely something interesting when it's nighttime. So again, we've been to many locations where like the shift happens overnight. It's like the veil completely thins, and it's a 180 from like when you walk in during the day. And we've also found that too at the National Forest. Like that also happens. So I'm wondering if like with Mount Shasta that might be something that happens. It's like during the day, it's all great. It's powerful. It's spiritual. But then it kind of like flips at night where things are allowed to kind of lurk and creep, you know? And this person also goes on to say that they never basically had any bad encounters with things there, just like curious beings. So that's kind of interesting. And like I said, the whole Mount Shasta thing, it's very, I don't know, like a lot of people are saying, oh, it's nothing but good energy. I never get anything bad. And then there's a couple people that have had some crazy things, like that time warp story I shared in part 1. There's some people that are like, yeah, I just feel like weird, but not anything crazy. Like it's just like in the middle, I guess. So, and then a lot of times it's interesting because, you know, they say Mount Shasta is a portal or a vortex. And sometimes that's how portals or vortexes are, that I found, is that like they're not good or bad. It's a doorway that allows things through, and sometimes it's good things are coming through, and sometimes it's bad things coming through. So it's just kind of interesting, like compiling everything that is said about Mount Shasta and like what we know about paranormal stuff from our experiences. But the person on the Reddit actually answered a couple questions that were very good questions that were asked by other people that were, you know, tuning into the article, but into the story itself. So one person had asked, how far were you from this thing? And did you get a sense of its height and size? Did it make any facial expressions, or do anything else stand out? Does anything else stand out? And this person says, I'd say I was about 100 feet away from me. Compared to the trees and bushes it was around, it seemed taller than any human I've seen, but nothing crazy. And no, it didn't have a face whatsoever. At least not from what I could tell. Its head was just a white oval spear, and it seemed like a white silhouette of someone wearing a robe, but 3D. Other than the part where it tilted its head, it just stood there motionless. The music and song I heard is what stands out to me the most. Even compared to the actual thing, it came out of nowhere and ended so abruptly. The sound isn't even something I can describe. It didn't feel right, but not malicious at the same time. I honestly would pass seeing the thing off as a trick of the light or an illusion of some kind if it wasn't for the music. So the music is what really stands out to this person that experienced it. And it's so hard because like, when you're there, especially if it's something that you can't describe, it's so hard to convey the intensity to somebody by just, you know, telling the story. Another person asked, what color were the eyes of the creature? Was it walking upright, and did it have long arms and legs? I thought that's interesting because sometimes, you know, like different entities have different colors. Like a lot of times demonic things will have red eyes, or I've even seen yellow eyes. So interesting. But this is where it gets even kind of like creepier, but no eyes. It looked like a white silhouette of a human in a robe, but it had very clearly tangible and had texture. I don't know about the legs since they weren't visible, but the arms did seem a little bit longer than usual. Although it did not walk or move other than its head, it did seem upright. So yeah, that's creepy. And it kind of gives me like I'm going to say it like a last name, I'm sorry. Like Glimmerman entity kind of vibes. That's what it kind of gives me. I don't know why. As I'm reading the story and when I read it the first time, that's kind of what it reminded me of. The user that shared the story put the coordinates of the location of which he drove his car. So we're going to actually share the Google Earth 3D drone shot of the area where he parked his car on our Instagram. So if you guys want to go see that. But if you want to look it up on your own, I will put the coordinates that he put in the episode description. So if you want to go type those in and see where he was, you can. But he also goes on to say it's honestly the most hidden trail I've ever been on. Weirdly enough, there was still trail signs at the end of the dirt road. So needless to say, don't randomly park your car as far as it could go. Anyways, but it's probably a good thing his car was that close because then he could like hightail it to the car. But another person had commented on the same thing. And this is another part that it was like rabbit hole after rabbit hole for me for this story. But another commenter that goes by the name of Ragtime Dancer posted, what strikes me most about the story is the music. I lived in Ireland. This person's a native of Chicago, now living in Oregon for many years. Talked about the late husband was a butler to the Marquis of Waterford. And they lived on his estate, which is the largest walled, I think is how it's walled. Sorry. Walled. Oh my gosh, everybody. I'm sorry. Okay. Walled an estate in Europe. Parts of the main house are over 900 years old. The entire estate is strange, and I feel it is kind of a portal to other realms. So we're talking about another portal, which anybody that's listening, a portal is basically a doorway to the other side, is what I call it. A vortex is like it's producing energy, and I feel like a portal is just a doorway. It's the best way to describe how I feel like those things are. Goes on to say, I and many others experienced numerous odd occurrences. The one that stands out to me the most was my encounter with fairies. I never previously believed in them, but my encounter made me a believer. Aside from their appearance, what struck me the most was their singing. It sounded exactly like the music you described. So, could there be fairies on Mount Shasta too? Could fairies be something that we were experiencing in the national forest? Who knows? It's just so crazy. So crazy. I don't know. It's like I said, my mind keeps getting blown by some of these stories, and I'm just like, because fairies is something that I've never experienced. I know we shared the story about like the gnome and stuff like that Isaac has experienced, and I have experienced also. But fairies, I don't know. Like, I don't even know where to think with that, you know? I mean, there's so many other creatures. There's so many other things. Would I be surprised at this point? No. But I've never said, okay, 100%. The only place, funny enough, that I actually fairy ever came up when I'm doing the whole psychic stuff was actually at the park. The park that we go and investigate at, that's in our neighborhood. There was something that came up about fairies a while back, which is funny because I've actually heard humming, thinking about it. Whoa. Okay. I've actually heard humming at the park as well. So I don't know. At this point, I have no clue. I don't know, but that would be an interesting question to ask next time we go to the park. Is there fairies here? Is that something that's a thing, So yeah, to me, that's a very interesting block of information regarding Mount Shasta and the areas, especially with the singing. And maybe if you've heard the singing too at locations near you guys, where you guys are at in specific spots, maybe it's fairies. Okay, so next story takes a different turn. So this isn't necessarily entities or higher beings. We are talking about the strangeness and creepiness that sometimes occurs at places like this. And it's not necessarily, how would I say this? It's not entities. It's not something that's on the ether or astral realm or anything like that. It is actual people in the 3D causing weird stuff. And so I feel like with Mount Shasta, with all of the stuff that's, projected, you're going to get the extreme side to everything, right? And there's some extreme sides to the spiritual and the paranormal and everything like that. That is bizarre. I've experienced it. I know, like, I've seen it firsthand. So I know not everything is pure intentions. Not everything is, and I think this also goes into the whole like safety stuff too. So like, I know even with us at certain locations, like it's important to have safety because there's been people that have done weird stuff. Anyways, so this username, he goes by the name Jankbud. But anyways, so this is how the story starts. Kind of a long story, sorry. This isn't paranormal, but does fall in line with the sentient that strange things happen on that mountain. Me and a few buddies decided to go camping on Mount Shasta. Driving up the side of the mountain to the camping spot, we all commented on the energy in the air. Just felt heavy. When we got to our campground, all the other spots were vacant, and that was eerie because we were there during peak camping seasons. Despite that, we moved forward with our plans and partook in dinner. After dinner, we sat around the campfire when 2 white school buses with blacked out windows drove past our tent and further down into the campsite and further up the mountain. Again, we talked about the strange energy and who and what the buses were transporting at that hour. It was about 10 p.m., so already a little sus. Anyways, we shook it off and started to wind down for bed. My buddy, who was in a different tent, unzipped mine and asked if I could hear chanting. I listened and could definitely hear the same monotone chanting. We decided to investigate. We all got dressed and decided to do a recon mission. It was actually very exciting. We brought flashlights, but all agreed not to turn them on to avoid detection. As we crept up the mountain to where we were suspected the group was, we spotted the 2 buses, side by side. The chanting was definitely louder, but seemed to originate from behind the buses. We were pretty creeped out at this point, but proceeded. 2 of us went into the back end of the bus, and 3 others went to the front so we could keep our profile low and figure out what was happening. As I peeked around the back of the bus, I saw about 30 people in full robes circled around a woman in a chair and a man in a full robe standing next to her. The man in the middle was chanting something in another language. If he had to guess, he said it sounded like Latin. And then the circle of people would repeat the same incantation. We spied on the group for about 3 minutes when it dawned on us that this could potentially be a dangerous situation. I signaled to the others in the group to leave, and we speed hiked back down to our tents. We discussed after and came to the conclusion that it could possibly have been a cult, who knows. He couldn't speculate what they were doing with the woman in the center, but it all felt very unnatural. The next day, they decided to pack up early and book it down the mountain to Wheat, Oregon, and get a hotel. They still speculate about what could have stumbled on, and they all still get goosebumps talking about it. So that is crazy. I couldn't imagine. I mean, you guys have seen, anybody that's tuned into the lives know that we've been investigating sometimes and people will just like show up and I get freaked out by it. I just don't like it. I don't like that. There's been times where we have been at a location. I'm not going to say the location just for the, but we were at a location and we weren't doing anything. It was a 24-hour location and we were chased out of there by people like wanting to fight us. It just didn't make any sense because the more and more we started kind of uncovering what the heck was happening at this location, and it was very ritualistic. It was like they knew and they were watching us and they didn't like what we were doing, especially when we tried to cleanse the area. It was a no-go. It was so I've been in situations where I've seen this firsthand. And like I said, I think there's such a not misguided, but like thing that how certain people look determines if they're going there and doing shady stuff. Those people in ropes, because I know I've had people make assumptions about me because in high school, and stuff, I just gothic. I'm a metalhead through and through. I've had like a teacher at one point make a comment about like metalheads like sacrificing and doing ritualistic stuff. And yeah, there is people out there that are just happen to be metalheads that do that kind of stuff, that mess around with that kind of stuff. But you know what? There's also doctors and lawyers and people that look plain Jane, you know, that go out there and do that kind of stuff too, because it's all about power, and power has no identity. Evil has no identity. You know, it's not one specific type of person that is evil or one specific type of person that wants power. You know, everybody, well, not everybody, obviously, but you know, it's all different types of groups. I mean, you can have the extreme Christian groups that do like wonky stuff. You can have the extreme, satanic groups that do wonky stuff. So the moral of the story, just be careful, especially when you go out investigating in the middle of nowhere. Because I know even Isaac and I take precaution for actual people. You know, like obviously we use our abilities to kind of help with like demonic things and negative entities and stuff like that. And that I honestly, like, I am more comfortable with like protecting myself with than actual like people. And that's why you see Isaac sometimes take things with him at locations just in case, because, you know, you never know what you're going to stumble upon. I know from experience. So this is just an example of two. And it's so crazy because you have like the indigenous tribes of the area that work so hard to protect Mount Shasta and use it as just a sacred place. And then you have probably groups like this that come in there and also kind of like ruin it, if that makes sense. Not ruin it, but I mean, who knows what their intent was going there and doing that stuff, because you don't know. I mean, you know, I know I would probably be running out of there. I would just be like, Isaac, no, we can't stay here. There's people on buses and robes. It just doesn't fit right. Anyways, so next story we're going to is a missing 411 story, and it's one that is well shared. And it's a public story. It's not like it started on a forum, but then it really got talked about in different ways and different outlets as well. And this is also known as the robot grandma story. So for those of you that this is your first episode or you haven't really heard about Missing 411, Missing 411 refers to a collection of unexplained disappearances that have taken place in national parks, rural regions, and vast public lands. So national forests, those kind of situations. These cases are peculiar in that they don't seem to be linked to mental illness or intentional disappearance. The phrase was introduced by David Paul. I always say this guy's name wrong, and I hate that I say it wrong. I literally look it up before I say his name, and I still say it wrong. Paulides. I don't know. I feel like my mouth can't just like say that name. I don't know why. But he was an ex-law enforcement officer who has since become an investigative researcher. Paulides' work has revealed patterns and clusters and these baffling disappearances, suggesting deeper mysteries and prompting questions about what unknown forces might be at work in our natural environments. He posts a lot of his findings in detail in the Missing 411 book series and then in subsequent documentaries. He has criticized the National Park Service for not establishing a sufficient system to catalog and track those cases. And these tend to have strange characteristics, such as victims frequently missing one or both shoes, bodies being discovered in areas previously searched, all of that stuff. So there's some theories that maybe extraterrestrial beings, cryptids, something like that, something unnatural is kind of happening with these people. And it's kind of, I know some of the main stories that kind of happen is like kids get taken and they end up in a spot that baffles the searchers. Why is a kid with no shoes up on the side of a cliff, walking through really treacherous terrain? Like, how do they get there? And then of course the stories that sometimes the kids tell, and there's a lot of skeptics when it comes to the Missing 411 stuff. A lot of times they say like, oh, well, a kid can hallucinate, kid has a wild imagination, that kind of stress of disappearing. It's the woods. You could disappear. An adult could disappear very, very easily. So it's kind of all of that thing, all of those kind of things that skeptics kind of latch onto when they're talking about trying to debunk these stories and stuff like that. So this particular story happened in October 2010. So a particular incident occurred on Mount Shasta, California, involving a 3.5-year-old boy who they refer to as John Doe. So basically, he was camping with his parents when John vanished from the campsite at 6:30 p.m. Immediately went to searching, and his parents couldn't find him. Local authorities and then search and rescue were on the scene, and 5 hours later, they discovered John in a thicket. Upon returning home, John remained silent about the incident until he saw his grandmother, Kathy. He then shared a strange story claiming she was in the woods with him during his disappearance. He described the woman, who he at the time thought was his grandmother, that was polite but weirdly interested in his stomach. She asked him to do some crazy things, which he was unable to do. And then she led him into a cave that was filled with dusty purses and guns and told him that he was from outer space and had been placed there in his mother's womb. So I could just imagine these parents like, what the heck is that? Like, what is going on? However, when he saw her in the light, he said that she resembled more of a robot than his grandmother. And he expressed he liked his real grandma, Kathy, over the one he met during his disappearance. Apparently, Kathy herself had a weird experience on Mount Shasta where she woke up outside of her tent with a puncture wound on her neck that she thought was an insect bite. So, creepy. But apparently, she initially shared her firsthand encounter on a site called Above Top Secret. And I guess it's similar to like Reddit and like forum where you can share your story and ask for like, hey, has anybody else had a situation like this? And again, the case was highlighted by David Paulinus in his book Missing 411 North America and Beyond. But I went ahead and went to where she first put her story down. And I have it here. I'm going to read to you from her words. This is the actual post that she did. So she posted this on November 15th, 2012 at 12:57 p.m. Okay, so this is her. So last fall, my 3.5-year-old grandson was lost in the Shasta forest for 5 hours. Thanks to volunteers and rescue personnel, he was found. My son said he was here, then within a second he was gone. They thought he had been abducted by other campers. Trust me, the worst nightmare ever. About 3 weeks after this happened, he was at my house, and out of the blue, he announced, "I don't like the other Grandma Cappy." His name for me, Grandma Kathy. I said, "What are you talking about, buddy? I'm the only Grandma Cappy." He said, "Don't you remember when I was lost in the woods?" Well, the other Grandma Cappy grabbed me and took me to a creepy place. She's really a robot. I was thinking he was telling a story, so I asked, "Well, what was creepy about it? Why do you think she was a robot?" He said, "It was a cave of spiders and there were purses and guns. I was too scared, so I didn't touch anything. But when she climbed a ladder, the light made her look like a robot. There were other robots too, but they didn't move. So I asked, 'What did she do with you, buddy?' She made me lay down to look at my tummy, then she tried to get me to poop on a sticky paper, but I couldn't go." Which is another, I don't know, like that is so weird, right? Like I know you guys probably hearing this are like, what? I was like, what too? So I don't know. But I couldn't go. She told me that I am from outer space and they put me in my mom's tummy. Then she took me back to the river and said to wait under the bush until somebody found me. I called my son and asked, "What the H are you letting my grandson watch on TV?" And I told him what he said. He said that he told me the same story a few days ago, but chalked it up to having the smartest, most amazing kid with the biggest imagination ever. I'm grandma, so of course I had to agree. I know that kids have imaginations, but it was the pooping on sticky paper that really makes me wonder. I've never watched a TV program that mentioned pooping on sticky paper. There were other details too much to list, but one of the reasons I am bothered by this story is because I was camping in the same area the year before, and I woke up one morning face down in the dirt out of my tent and sleeping bag. I had a puncture wound in the back of my head. I'm a grandma in my 50s. I don't sleep in the dirt. I was violently ill, too sick to even pack and go home. I thought it was a spider bite, and it took me a very long time to feel normal. I had no creativity, no emotions. My friend was camping with us. He was sleeping in the camper. He also had a quote-unquote bite in the back of his neck and was violently ill. We were in separate sleeping areas. Before we went to bed, there were red eyes shining through the trees in our flashlights. We thought a herd of deer were trying to get to the river, so we didn't think too much about it. But now I wonder. My friend is checking into wildlife cameras. He wants to go up there and place them around that campground. One weird thing about the place is that there's no wildlife. The only birds we saw were 2 crows. Uh-oh. They flew in, sat on a tree, and watched us. I thought they were waiting for the Cheetos to fall in the dirt. At the time, we were creeped out by them. I camp a lot. Usually there are butterflies, birds, squirrels, etc. This time, nothing. We didn't even see a bee. My son has forbidden to ask my grandson about the incident because you can create a false memory by repetitive reminding. So for a year, I had not mentioned it to him. But he is 4.5 now, and I asked him again about what happened. He repeated the same story, except he said she took him into a dungeon instead of a cave. It would be interesting to see if he has memories of these events when he's about 8 to 9 years old. This was at McLeod, California. So yeah, I don't know. That is very strange. Of course, you have people that are like, whoa, that makes sense. Mount Shasta is wild. And then you also have people in the comments on that particular post that was like, could you have just been drunk and fell over in the dirt? Like literally somebody asked that. And so, of course, she said no. And it's so hard when people share experiences because, you're not there to experience it. But I mean, that's crazy. And I don't think it's too far-fetched from like other things that have been shared about like different places like that and encounters with other beings that are not human that, have been shared. Especially, I don't know, the back of the neck. That's a weird pinpoint on people that I always notice like that they feel weird stuff. I don't know. Anyways, but like I said, I read that story and I was like, whoa. That's like one of those stories that you like listen to and you just gotta like sit for a second. Like, what should I be going on that camping trip this weekend? Ooh. But yeah, so it makes you think, like gives you an idea like what did this little boy see? And like I said, skeptics will argue that in this case, like where stress is so high, kids can hallucinate, but at the same time, all of these cases, there's a lot of unexplained variables and stuff that just doesn't make sense. And of course, we mentioned missing 411 and people disappearing in places like the Alaskan Triangle, Bridgewater Triangle. And a lot of the skeptics like to claim that, like, and it is true that, like, the environment and terrain are tough in these areas, especially in national forests. I mean, it's easy to get lost. A lot of skeptics just believe a lot of this missing 411 is just people that just get lost and just get lost, So another super interesting story, an article that I stumbled upon was a KQED article. And it just shows the craziness, again, that kind of surrounds Mount Shasta for the intrigue that it carries. So there was an article that was published in 2018 about a mysterious hole that was about 60 feet deep. This event occurred in 2008, but the article was written in 2018. So a man was interviewed in the article named Elijah Sullivan, who grew up in the former logging town at the base of the mountain. He had said in the article that it looked like it had been dug by hand at night using a makeshift pulley system to remove the dirt. A ladder, some buckets, and plastic water bottles were left behind. So we're talking about a 60 feet deep hole, right? Elijah Sullivan went on to include in the article, you'll hear a lot of people talking about Lemuria, maybe even asking for directions. People make pilgrimages here. It's like a New Age Mecca. Another interesting thing that was mentioned in the article was apparently he also went on to discuss that in 1987 there was an event called the Harmonic Convergence, and it marked Mount Shasta for a destination for New Age spirituality. According to the KQED article, it was a huge production and it was looked at as like a spiritual Woodstock. So again, you could just imagine, you probably have people there that just go there and experience a euphoric type of encounter there or have completely pure intentions. But then you have people that are also on the extreme side of it, and it's a bit weird, But like we said in the first part of Mount Shasta, this mountain is very sacred to the indigenous people of the area. In an article, they actually asked the tribe leader of the local tribe there. Her name is Colleen Siskick. She said she heard about the hole and is generally worried about spiritual and recreational visitors harming the area. She goes on to say that they came out of the mountain, meaning the tribe and the indigenous people, so we're obligated to be watchers of the mountain. And I don't blame them because, like I said, you'll have people that are there with just pure intentions and then some crazy stuff. That was actually, so one thing that was actually produced, Sullivan's second theory of why this hole was dug. So, like I said, Elijah Sullivan was somebody that grew up in the area, knows the area. But he said the first one obviously being the whole search for Lemuria and the hidden city. But he said another one that he thinks that was probably trying to happen or could have happened why the hole was dug was for native artifacts. So apparently arrowheads are very sought after, and even human remains sometimes, which is extremely sad, especially being a sacred area for indigenous people. But apparently if you tried to do that and you were caught, there's a fine up to $20,000 and jail for 1 year. And apparently every offense that you do, the penalty goes up and up for each time you try and do that. So Sullivan goes on in the article to say he called 2 Oregon State police officers who had worked on looting cases like that. They had said, oh yeah, it looks like looters. Sullivan said the officers told them that looters often work at night and remove the dirt from the dig site for processing, which is what the diggers did on Mount Shasta. But the Forest Services disagree with Sullivan's sources. They said that there isn't many Native American artifacts on the mountain because it's a sacred site, so tools and ceremonial items would have been packed out. Apparently, the Forest Service has their own theories about what the diggers were looking for, but they didn't share, so that's interesting. I could just imagine being like somebody that upkeeps a national forest or a park ranger and stuff like that, just like the crazy stories that come to play. But another crazy story that we're going to talk about more about this silence that happens on Mount Shasta or things that people have incurred. So apparently there was a person who, I believe they live in Europe, but they were here on a road trip across the western U.S. that took place earlier. I don't know. It doesn't say the date, but that took place about a year earlier from when they posted their encounter. Apparently, it led them through the Shasta National Forest, which obviously remote, wild, on their way back to the coast. In the heart of the wilderness, this person had asked their boyfriend to pull along the side of the highway for a quick nature break, just to get out and see the sights and stuff like that. As this person ventured into the woods, the focus was basically this person had to pee. Okay, I'm just gonna say that this person had to pee, and so the focus was not really on anything else, just going to the bathroom. And so the boyfriend waited in the car with the windows down. After 3 minutes, this person returned. As the person neared the car, noticed that the boyfriend seemed unusually alert. When she was back in the car, sorry, my reading skills, man. When this person was back in the passenger seat, quickly locked the doors. The boyfriend turned and asked seriously, "Did you notice it?" And this person was confused. Notice what? The boyfriend responds, "Didn't you realize that the forest is completely silent? There's no birds chirping, no rustling of leaves, no sounds of wildlife. It's as if the place swallowed all signs of life." We promptly rolled up the windows and resumed on the journey without any further checking it out. And it was something that apparently lingered in this person's mind. So when they got back to Europe, it was something they continuously thought about and just thought was just weird, and even asked themselves, what is going on at Mount Shasta? What is And as soon as the person stepped out of the vehicle, the silence was already there. So the fact that we have this one person that also experienced the silence, and they were probably at two different areas of the mountain. That's another thing that's kind of interesting. So one of the things that was talked about is the apex predator idea. And sometimes this circulates with Bigfoot encounter stories as well. So to get more of an explanation for it, I went to AI and I asked, is it possible for the woods to go silent when an apex predator is nearby? And the AI said, yes, it's quite possible for the woods to go silent when an apex predator is nearby. This phenomenon is often observed in nature and can be attributed to the survival instincts of animals. When smaller animals, such as birds or squirrels, sense a threat, they may either go quiet until the threat passes or make a lot of noise to warn others. For instance, sudden silence can indicate the presence of a predator, while sudden cacophonic noise, often from birds, can mean that the predator has disturbed a population. It's also worth noting that some animals will choose to freeze so they don't draw attention to themselves and to save energy for when they feel threatened and enough to flee. So could it have been like maybe maybe not Bigfoot, but maybe like some sort of other animal that's like a predator in that area? Who knows? But it's just, I don't know, it's just weird. Another person added that they were a resident of Shasta County and used to reside in Dunsmuir, and they worked in a ski park on the mountain. Goes on to say that there is an uncanny aura, particularly during the winter nights. Silence is normally silence in a place triggers a primal caution within us. But this location transcends that. If there's anything I could add to your accurate intuition, it could be a suggestion to learn more about local folklore and tales. And obviously we've done that with these two series. The area is quite particular, and the experiences and emotions that person has encountered are unparalleled. So that just shows you, like, even local people are like, ugh. So like I said, I've scoured many stories, and here are just some things that people kept on encountering. And I've watched tons of YouTube videos. If you want to look at, like, actually hear more stories, because these stories are intense when it comes to Mount Shasta, like on the good side of things, on the bad side of things, it's like interesting. And I think it's a lot of stuff too that we've covered and we've talked about from other places and we've even experienced. But there's a really good YouTuber, and he's got a whole series called What Lurks Beneath. And I'll put all his information in the description of the episode and probably share it on our Instagram. But he does a phenomenal job at, like, sharing stories. His narration is really, really good. And he has a lot of Mount Shasta stories. But some things that people have encountered that have been, like, sporadic, that I've literally written down and jotted about this place is a strange voice, like, calling out to campers, orbs and glowing lights, shadow figures, specifically that all white figure, potential, like, intuition vibes about, like, a bipedal creature, so like Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Some people have even caught EVPs while out there, so that's interesting. And then some people have also witnessed, like, thick fog that just seems like uncanny, like it just is weird. So like I said, needless to say, Mount Shasta is crazy, interesting. And definitely when you start diving into everything, you dive into it more than what we have. It's a lot. And it's really interesting to hear everybody's stories, because it definitely has, like, a balance of, like, mysteriousness with, like, UFO stuff and the whole concept of, is there a hidden city like Teleios, you know, and the Lemurians and all of that. And just the unknown, good and bad. I do believe, like, if you were to ask me my personal opinion and, like, what I've gotten just by channeling in, I feel like we said at the beginning, where it was kind of like, or what I said at the beginning, where it's kind of like a neutral portal that kind of, like, brings good and bad, and it depends on the actual people on what is brought through, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. That makes sense to me, but I don't know. I do think, like, it holds a lot of energy, and it's up to the people that visit it and do things on the mountain, whether or not it's positive or good. You know, like, you can have a really positive place, but sometimes people will come in there and ruin it. And it just, I mean, I've seen it firsthand. So it just, because again, these places hold a significant power. And so it's all in the hand of who uses it, kind of thing. And I think too, it's really sad that I feel like the indigenous tribes really, really try to keep it positive and light and stuff like that. And then you have people that are weird and do things that may not be the nicest, you know, up there. But another thing that I found in the comment section, I'm telling you people, comment sections of these forums are the place to go. One of the things that also made me ponder, made me look into something else, and this was the very last thing. So before I conclude this episode, and like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with me for a bit on this episode. But one comment on one of the YouTube videos that intrigued me was about someone that claimed to be local to the Mount Shasta area. And this person was urging people to not look at Mount Shasta as the serial killer mountain that everyone makes it out to be. That for the most part, Mount Shasta is good energy. However, there's a mountain next to it called Mount Lassen. It's pronounced, or it's spelled Lassen. And this person says Mount Lassen is where the dark, evil, malicious energy is. Woods are filled with shape-shifting elementals, and they leave off with saying, never turn your back on the Lassen woods day or night. Shasta is good, Lassen is bad. And the crazy thing is, I looked up Mount Lassen, and there wasn't any kind of crazy stories like you would find with Mount Shasta. It's kind of bizarre. So it might just be something where it's like more of a local thing, versus, you know, like obviously everybody knows about Mount Shasta. But apparently I did find one intriguing thing before we go about Mount Lassen. So apparently there's something called the Boiling Springs. So Boiling Springs Lake in California is a mysterious lake with a grayish toned water that appears to boil. The lake is a popular destination for hikers, but many find it creepy and feel watched from afar. A local legend revolves around a young girl with black hair wearing a bunny mask, who uses her charms to lure men into the woods near the lake. The dense forest surrounding the lake is referred to as the Witch's Cauldron, due to its boiling waters, which attracts those involved in the occult. Some believe human sacrifices have been made in the lake's waters, and witches may chant at midnight hours. The lake is said to be haunted by the woman who leads hikers into the woods, causing nightmares and causing them to never live to tell the story. So needless to say, if we're ever in this area, if me and Isaac ever go to this area, which I wouldn't be opposed to going, even Mount Shasta, just to experience, you know, everybody wants to experience like even the positive portals, you know, and that right there is such an important talking point of why you should always talk to locals, because that person was a local. And you look up any, like, even if you Google places that are like Mount Shasta, it does not say anything about Mount Lassen. So I'm going to research more about Mount Lassen. Who knows, maybe that'll be an episode too, but that's why you talk to the locals. And I know we have like probably a list of like 15 places we need to go. And it's all because local people told us stories that weren't necessarily on the internet, but like if you dig further and further along, you find the history and it's there. It's just not like an easy search. If you're a paranormal investigator, you're going to a location, ask the locals. And always be like aware of surroundings. And if you start hearing like really eerie quietness or loud noises, just know. Anyways, but yeah, so definitely look to locals for when you're talking about hotspots. Like if we ever actually start traveling, first thing I'm doing is forums, talk to the locals. So, but yeah, it just makes you think, is Mount Shasta just a portal and the experience you encounter is entirely up to you? Or is Mount Shasta just a sacred place that harbors a bunch of energy and it just flows either or, and it's just luck of the draw kind of thing? But yeah, I think that about ends it here. Again, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed spending an hour or so with me. And I hope you enjoyed the Mount Shasta series in itself. I know it took a while to get both parts out. But like I said, Isaac has been working his butt off in the heat and the humidity, and I thought the least I could do was get this episode recorded. So I hope it wasn't too horrendous or too boring without Isaac around, because he always says interesting commentary, and I'm kind of sad like I don't know his ending theories about Mount Shasta. But yeah, we want to move on for you guys and not just like leave you hanging, like, where's the encounter stories? You promised it like 4 weeks ago, So, but if you yourself out there have ever had a paranormal experience and would like us to share it on an episode, don't ever hesitate to reach out. Or if you just want opinions about it, don't ever feel like you can't reach out to us. If you're dealing with some kind of funky paranormal stuff at your house or with yourself, or you just want something looked at paranormal wise, or you need stuff removed, I mean, all it takes is a quick phone call, a video call with Isaac, and he can move it. And then if you ever want me to look into, we've actually had a couple people message in and ask about their childhood homes that they no longer live in, but like they're just curious, like what they experienced. It was crazy. So like, can you tell me what else happened there? Like, so if you ever feel like you want to just talk about spooky stuff too, always feel free to reach out to us. We try and get back in a timely manner, and we are never too busy for any of you guys. So if you ever want to reach out, make sure you do so. And yeah, so we have no problem helping where help is needed and talking when talking is needed. So you can listen and check out us out on all of our social media. I'm going to butcher this. I know Isaac's listening, and he's like, because he doesn't know what's in this episode. So he's probably listening, and he's probably like, don't butcher my outro. But I probably will. Okay. On Instagram, you can find us at Hidden in the Shadows Podcast. On TikTok, we are at Hidden in the Shadows Podcast 2. Who the heck has Podcast 1? I don't know. But, On X, we are at Hidden in the Shaw 6. Yes. Oh gosh, I don't even know that. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. That's correct. YouTube, you can also find us. You can listen to us on YouTube as well. And we are Hidden in the Shadows Podcast on YouTube, or you can get everything in a nice little bundle at hiddenintheshadowspodcast.com. And yeah, I think that's about it. Our next I didn't put our next episode. So that being said, our next episode it's either going to be a spontaneous paranormal conversation episode about abilities and manipulating the 3D, or a UFO alien type of story we're diving into. So Isaac's been super intrigued by the Chris Bledsoe case. I hope I said his last name right, because I keep butchering that too. Isaac keeps telling me, no, it's this, and I keep saying the wrong thing. So, but yeah, there's a book about it and an upcoming movie about that whole situation. And funny enough, I didn't know this. It happened like super close to us. So you guys have heard me talk about Wilmington and around that area. Yeah, that's where it happened. So like an hour from us. It's kind of crazy. But then we also have an episode coming up too about Mel's Hole and like weird holes popping up around the world. And we're going to call that one What the Hole, because what the hole, Anyways, so I hope you enjoyed this. I kind of enjoyed just talking to you guys one-on-one. And yeah. Okay. So yeah, without further ado, we will catch you weirdos in the next one. Yeah. How'd I do?